from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of our program. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And the big news today is that O.J. Simpson died of prostate cancer. And I looked at his Twitter, and I saw that, whether it wasn't his last post was like his family saying, hey, we lost our dad. But the post before that, I think it was from 2 months ago in February, and he was making a video, and somebody asks him, hey, are you in hospice? And he says, hospice? No, man, get out of here. I'm planning a Super Bowl party, and I'm trying to figure out, what we're going to have to drink at the party, and blah, blah, blah. And he seems in excellent spirits. And I retweeted that, saying, R.I.P. OJ, because I thought that there was a little irony there, right? Him 2 months ago saying, no, I'm not in hospice. I don't know if he was or wasn't, but apparently he's not here today. And one of my followers took exception and just began to school me and, tell me, R.I.P., like how could I wish this man an R.I.P. on his death when, he murdered people and this and that and the other, whatever. So to that I will respond. I think in life, from the life I've lived and from the people I've known, you kind of forgive the dead, right? For the most part, right? I understand people have a bone to pick with Osama bin Laden, right? and other horrible people. And I get that. And if you say R.I.P. somewhat facetiously, I can understand it. But I don't see any benefit to anyone to be angry with dead people. And I say that in all sincerity. I think that for me, God has blessed me immeasurably. Beautiful children, wonderful career, excellent listeners. There's a lot of things for me to be happy about. I'm not angry. I'm not angry at O.J. Simpson. I'm not. It is. If it is what it is, right? I mean, he did what he did, and he's got to handle that with God. So I just wanted to share that thought because I found it so interesting that, I realize it's talk radio and Twitter and the rest of social media, and people will have an opinion about everything, and people, do get upset with you for anything. I'm sure yesterday a lot of people were upset with me because we were talking about Ukraine, and I was saying I think we should help Ukraine. There's a lot of people out there that want me to say, screw Ukraine. I hope we build a mountain with the dead bodies of the Ukrainians. It's just not I don't feel that way. I don't want to kill anybody. And I think that's part of the issue that we have in life is that there's so much vitriol in what we do. I don't hate Democrats. I hate their policies. Anyway, I don't want to be on my soapbox for too long on this, but I think that's a point that I wanted to make. O.J. Simpson passed away. He died of cancer, right? Every dog has his day. Everybody pays the piper. It's not my job to figure out who's what and how while we're here, right? God is our judge. Now, it is my job to judge you if you're a horrible politician, if you're a crazy celebrity, and, I'm going to pass judgment on you and I'm going to share my opinions. Sure. And you're going to do the same with me and with others. That's fine. But actually being angry with people and disrespecting the memory of the dead, for what? For what purpose? so I can down talk him yet again, as if everybody else is not doing that. Like Caitlyn Jenner is not saying good riddance. And again, if Caitlyn Jenner is saying that's on Caitlyn Jenner, because they all knew each other. They were all really good friends. And I get that. I'm not here to defend OJ. I'm not an OJ fan. I don't even like football. I'm just making the point that I think at some point you let it go and you go, all right, the guy's dead. What else? What else can you get? Can you get blood from a stone? No. So let's move on. Speaking of moving on, the news. There's a lot of news out there. But what I wanted to talk about was the director of the FBI. Every now and again, he'll say something shady and not answer a question. Oh, no, I don't know if we had anybody in January 6th. I can't say that. I don't know if, if was it a setup? I don't know. I can't tell. He plays coy on so many things. But every now and again, he'll come out and say, this is the biggest threat we've seen and whatever and whatever and whatever. And today was one of those days, right, where he's talking about how dire things are. And I don't know. I don't know the purpose. I don't know the rationale behind it. But I know that it's happening. And I want you to listen to this audio clip from Christopher Wray.
Director Wray, have you read Robert Hur's special counsel report?
I have reviewed it.
Do you believe Joe Biden mishandled classified information?
I'm not going to discuss the report. That's the special counsel's report, and I've referred it.
In your opinion as director of the FBI, do you believe he mishandled classified information?
Again, I'm just going to refer to the report, and the special counsel can speak for himself on his report.
Are you aware, and this is breaking news right now, are you aware that there's an audio recording of Joe Biden saying to his ghostwriter in February of 2016, quote, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs," end quote? Are you aware of that audio recording?
I would just respectfully refer you to the special counsel.
No, I'm asking you, are you aware as director of the FBI? You're either aware or you're not.
I'm aware. Am I aware of what now?
Whether the audio exists of Joe Biden saying in February 2017, quote, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs," end quote, to his ghostwriter.
Again, I'm just going to refer to the special counsel and his testimony and his report.
It sounds like you might be aware of it then.
Elise Stefanik is terrific. She is a Republican congresswoman, the conference chair of the Republican Party from New York, and she's doing great. I think she's doing great. And Christopher Wray, again, he's getting smacked around. He's so used to it. He's so used to getting smacked around by Congress. The question is, so if did he know? What's he going to do about it? Is any action being taken? I don't know. I would love to know. I don't know if there's a real bombshell coming out here. I don't know if he's going to come and do like a Comey and read a letter, right? A Comey memo, a Director Wray memo, where he'll come out, a week before Election Day and say, look, this is gross negligence on behalf of Biden when, he said he had this classified info. I mean, I feel like everything is so disingenuous with these people. It really is. That it's kind of like, what do you do? What do you do but laugh, right? I'm definitely not going to get salty about this stuff because, shoot, I'll lose whatever hair I don't have left. Anyway, there's so much to talk about, and we're going to get into it tonight. Part of what we're going to discuss is how the New York City Police Department is being recruited. By who? By folks in Texas. That's right. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne is recruiting NYPD officers to come to Texas. Right? The weather's better. And she's doing that because she's saying, hey, look, if they don't want you there, we'll take you. And I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had there. Plus, I want to get her perspective on student loans, the border, which remains unchecked, Mayorkas, who's got a impeachment proceeding that's kind of being slow-walked, in my opinion. We've got inflation that is literally creeping back up, and this is something that can destroy the country, at least our economy. And E.J. Antoni was talking about that on this program last night. It's just remarkable what inflation can do to an economy. So, lots to discuss. I'm going to set this up so that we can come back and check in with Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, and we'll do some of your calls in about 30 minutes, maybe around 10:45, 10:50 East Coast time. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. So we've got cops in New York that are being courted to come to the Lone Star State, right? Leave the Big Apple and come to the Lone Star State. And I think that this is an interesting idea. Of course, nobody wants to lose cops, but it's a nice testament to know that there's folks out there that actually want the NYPD, because they apparently don't want them in New York, which is a damn shame. And Republican Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, who's been on this program before, she's put out an ad in the New York Post urging police officers in the Empire State to escape New York and move to Texas. I want to hear all about it. Welcome back, Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne.
Hey, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. So what was the impetus behind this? What made you say, you know what, let's recruit some NYPD officers?
You know, I was a local elected official. I was a city council member for 6 years. I was mayor for 6 years. I worked very closely with our police department. I saw what they did day in and day out. When I saw the images of the Jonathan Diller funeral and the politicians trying to strong arm their way in, the same politicians that basically caused this man's murder, where there are horrible liberal policies of letting criminals out. I mean, how many times had that murderer been arrested and let out of jail for committing violent crimes? I mean, dozens of times. And these are the policies that are empowering criminals. They're protecting criminals at the risk of our law officers' lives. And when I saw those politicians, those same politicians at this man's funeral and just basically there for a photo op, it irritated me so much. It just made me really angry. I'm thinking to myself, you know, you've got an opportunity. You have an opportunity to do some great things. You don't have to be stuck in New York City. You can come to Texas, where we actually revere, we respect, we love our law enforcement. We have a lower, a cost of living. We have a higher quality of life. You know, we appreciate the job that you do, the fact that you cowboy up every day. You come and you support our way of life. You defend our rights, and you put your lives on the line. And that should be respected. That should be revered. And you don't have to stay in that cesspool of New York City. Come on down to Texas. We'd love to have you. And by the way, I host one of the largest job fairs in our state. We had 16,000 people that showed up last year. We had an entire area just for law enforcement agencies. We're the fastest growing state in the country for a reason. We got a lot of people coming down, and we need great officers. And I just want to let them know they have a choice.
Outstanding. Folks, we're on with Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne. And, it's a shame that the politicians that you're talking about that are with their shameful actions, it's a shame that they don't have the appreciation for the men and women of law enforcement, the men and women in the NYPD that a congresswoman in Texas has. And I think it goes to show you of how disconnected some of our biggest, bluest cities are from reality. You look at what's happening in San Francisco with just the amount of crime and squatting and all of that. You look at New York, how it's following suit. They're punching women in the face left and right. If there's ever been a time for the police that we need them, it's now. And yet it seems like they don't care. The politicians, They just don't care.
No, because they're doing the political expedient thing, which is throwing the police officers under the bus. Think about this defund the police movement that you've seen over the last several years. What has it led to? Increases in crime, decreases in respect, increases in the amount of recidivism. And these same criminals, these violent criminals that are committing crimes day in and day out, you've got police officers that are risking their lives, they're arresting them, they're putting them in jail, only to have these liberal DAs and these liberal judges let them out the very next day. Think about the police officers that were beat in broad daylight in New York City. And by the way, it's not just one time. It's not just two times. You're starting to see it every other day in New York. And these criminals are being just kind of patted on the head. When you have people from Venezuelan gangs that are in our country illegally, they don't even have proper ID. and they are letting them out very next day without even cash bail. What does that tell you? If you're an officer, you've sworn, that you want to protect, our citizens. You're going to protect the laws. You're going to uphold the laws. You're going to enforce the laws. And then you are thrown under the bus by people who are elected, who really don't care. These are the policymakers. These are the lawmakers. And your job is to enforce the laws that they're making. And they are completely throwing you under the bus. They don't seem to care about the risk they're putting on your lives. You're seeing crime increase in their communities. And instead of caring about it, they are using you as a photo op. And it's ridiculous. It's got to stop. And look, when I was mayor, we had some hard cases, that our police officers faced. And I could easily have just said, oh, you know what, they're in the wrong. But they weren't. They were doing their job, and I stood behind them. And if more elected officials did that, you would see that respect continue. But instead, the folks in New York don't seem to care. And so my point is, come on down to Texas. We've got the job openings. We've got a great quality of life. We'd love to have you and your family.
Amen to that. Now, Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, I want to switch gears a little bit and get your opinion on a couple of things, because there's a lot that's going on in Washington, and there's just a lot in general. I know that some of your colleagues have been adamant about funding for Ukraine, and if it doesn't go the way that they want it to go with spending, they want to oust the current speaker. We've seen that happen with McCarthy. Is there a lot of momentum for that right now? Do you think there's a sufficient appetite to get rid of Speaker Johnson, or does he still have a shot? Can we expect him for the next couple of weeks or month?
Speaker Johnson is a great man. He's an honorable man. He's a very articulate. Look, he's a constitutional attorney. He's very conservative. But, man, I would not want to be in his role right now for anything. You couldn't pay me to be Speaker of the House right now when you've got a one-member majority. I mean, the job that he has been given to do is almost impossible unless you've got the entire conference behind you. And he is doing the best he can. He's being as transparent as he possibly can. But when he goes in to negotiate with the White House, with Chuck Schumer in the Senate, unless he's got the backing of the majority, which, by the way, right now would be 100% of the majority, 100% of us would have to vote for him. Unless he has that, they can, and they know they can blow him off. So, do I think it's smart right now to have a motion to vacate on Speaker Johnson? Absolutely not. What's your backup? We're in the middle of the game, and you're going to fire our coach. Okay, what's your backup? What's your plan B? And if you don't have that, which they obviously don't have that, I just think it's silly. And look, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I consider her a friend. She and I get along really well. I don't understand why she did this, and it's frustrating for those of us who really are interested in policy and want to move this country forward, that we're having to deal with some of this theater on the side. It doesn't make any sense.
Beth Van Duyne, stick with us, folks. Congresswoman from Texas, 24th District. We're coming right back with your calls as well in the segment following this upcoming segment. We're going to talk about student loans and everything else going on in Washington. Don't go anywhere. It's Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne and me, Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Tens of millions of people's debt was literally about to get canceled. But then some of my Republican friends and elected officials and special interests sued us, and the Supreme Court blocked us. But that didn't stop us. No, I mean it sincerely. We continue to find alternatives paths to reduce student debt payments.
So Biden says, look, the Supreme Court ain't stopping us. The law. Who cares about the courts? You got to love that. Folks, welcome back. I have the pleasure of speaking with Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, and she represents Texas's 24th District. And Congresswoman, when you hear who I like to call Joe El Baboso Biden saying he's just going to disregard what's happening with the Supreme Court, what's your initial reaction to that?
Well, it shouldn't surprise you. He's ignoring the law in every aspect of his presidency.
That's true.
From what's going down at the border to foreign affairs. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous that he is trying to buy votes, and the rest of the Democrats are going along with this. You obviously don't have the money to do this program. The Supreme Court has told you this does not fall within the executive realm of duties, that the only person, the only body that can do this is Congress, because it's got power of the purse, and that he's doing this so close to an election. And you know why? Just to buy votes. I'm on Ways and Means, and we had a hearing today, and I brought up the fact that, look, I paid for my own college. I took 3 years off in between high school and college. It took me 10 years to pay off my loans. I had kids. It was a tough thing to do, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who gets the degree. I'm the one who gets the benefit of it. I knew what I was doing. I signed up for it. I signed on that dotted line. It's my responsibility to pay it back, not somebody who is paying taxes who never got to go to college because they were working the whole time. It is completely unfair. And you think about it, you've got a college degree, and yet you're arguing that you didn't know that you actually had to pay back a loan, a debt that you took out.
Right.
That's offensive. What is your college degree worth if you don't even know that basic? But people who have not gotten those degrees should not be online. And if you sign that debt, it's as if I go out with a credit card and I go to town, and I still get to keep everything I bought with that credit card, but I expect taxpayers to pay for it. It's right. A ridiculous a ridiculous buyer of votes.
I think so too, but I think it works. I think people are going to look at Biden and go, "Oh my gosh, he helped me out with my loans." And I don't know how much it's going to work, and I don't know how how vast it's.
If they're not paying for it now, they're going to be paying for it later. Every single time you accept dollars like this from the government, recognize the fact that it is long-term debt that you're buying, and it's going to cost you at some point.
So my understanding of this is that because Obama turned the Department of Education into a bank, vis-a-vis a bank, and they have full control over that in the executive branch, that while he's saying he's canceling debt, what he's actually doing is restructuring the payment terms of the loan to make it a zero monthly payment with a $0 amount of being paid back, but yet it's not a canceled debt per se. And I think that's how he's able to skirt the system. What can you tell me about that?
Well, I mean, you're right. He's skirting the system. You've already had the Supreme Court who's come down and said this. He's skirting the system in an effort to buy votes. It's ridiculous, and everybody should be offended, especially, one, if you never could afford your college degree. Two, if you couldn't afford it, but you took out loans and then you paid them back. I mean, anybody, and which, by the way, is the vast majority of us, should be offended by this.
Oh, I think
and if
so
you
too.
if you are graduating students from a 4-year degree that, or from any degree basically, that have paid money into it and you can't get a job, why are we not holding these universities, these institutes of higher education more accountable? Why do we continue to give them taxpayer dollars if the people that they are graduating can't get jobs afterward?
Well, this is a big deal.
Sense.
I think it's a huge deal. That to me it's the bigger deal. It's the bigger deal of right now. Yeah, okay, this is some political sleight of hand to get things done. But I think the bigger issue is the fact that we have my children. I have 2 kids in college right now, and they grew up with, the fear of God that they had to get a bachelor's degree or bust. And, right before it's actually time for them, all of a sudden they said, you know what? I told them, you don't have to go to college if you don't want to, because it may not work out that way, right? It may not work out in your favor. They both decided they still want to go.
People who are learning life skills, people who are learning HVAC, people who are learning mechanics, those are the people right now that are getting paid a lot of money because there's actually a need, a desire for them, and people are willing to pay out the nose for the services they provide because they have a skill. Those jobs right now are on high demand. And so you're at the point, you don't have to get a 4-year degree. You don't have to go into debt, especially if the degree that you're getting is a worthless degree that you can't get a job when you graduate. But universities should not be able to charge whatever they want, recognizing the fact that right now the government is going to come in and pay that tuition. They need to be held accountable. If they're the ones who are charging outrageous amounts for tuition, they're graduating people who can't get jobs because they're not teaching them life skills. Instead of the taxpayer being on the hook when these loans don't get repaid, the universities have to be on the hook.
Now, Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, in the couple of minutes we have remaining, I want to get your take on the this story that's coming out of NPR. And you've got former President Trump calling to end the funding for National Public Radio after one of their own employees has kind of blown the whistle saying, yeah, no, there's an incredible bias here. Now, I don't think it's breaking news. You know, if you've ever listened to NPR, you can hear the bias. I've never been invited on. I think they've interviewed me one time. But my point is that you never hear any conservative perspective there. What do you think about this? And do you think they're actually at some point ever going to defund NPR?
You know, as long as they have a need for it, it's fine, but they don't. Right now, you've got so many different competing networks. I think it's a waste of money. And you're right. And it definitely has a bias. And that bias has been proven over and over again. If we're trying to get information out there, that's one thing. But again, the private sector is doing a pretty good job of that. There's high demand, and anybody who has a Twitter account now, anybody who's got social media is putting information out. So we're paying for something that there's not a need for. And when it's so highly one-sided and political, the taxpayer dollars should not be going to fund it.
I agree. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, I want you to let everybody know how they can follow you and support the work that you're doing.
They're welcome to contact me at on my website, which is bethfortexas.com. Love to have them. I also have Twitter, Facebook, everything. Basically, anything that's on social media, you guys can say Beth Van Duyne, but bethfortexas.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Outstanding. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thanks for fighting for America, fighting for Texas, and for being our guest tonight.
Rich, you're awesome. Thank you, and have a great night. Godspeed.
Folks, we're going to come right back to your calls and more as we discuss everything that happened during the day right here at night. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Just because I know how recently this was you, are you one of the people who will benefit from this program?
Now, I don't think I will be. Actually, I'm going to be one of the few that doesn't. I'm a member of Congress. I'm a little bit outside the threshold and bounds. But if I wasn't, just a few years ago, waitress me 5 years ago would have benefited from it. Congresswoman me will not, but that's okay. I'll take the knock if it means that people can get relief. And, this is huge. This is people getting the student loan forgiveness, their student loans canceled. It means that, it's hope to buy a house or have a kid or travel abroad or maybe even go back to school and pursue a career that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have. I mean, one of the reasons that's not me now is because I didn't feel like I'd be able to afford medical school. And so hopefully someone else who's at an ISEF competition somewhere will be able to do that because of this.
So that, of course, is my least favorite Congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, all out crazy herself. And she was on with Stephen Colbert. I think I played that for you on Tuesday when she was on Monday night. And what a stark contrast, right, between the Republican Congresswoman you just heard from, Beth Van Duyne from Texas, and the far-left progressive Democrat socialist that she actually identifies as, AOC, all out crazy in New York. Really just worlds apart, right? One says she's pro-law enforcement. She wants people to make the right decisions. Don't go to school if you can't afford it, blah, 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 right? Or at least you can go to school if you can't afford it. And this is the biggest misnomer. Let me just get on that for a second. You know, the less money you earn, the less money your family has, the easier it is for you to go to school for free. Right? Easier to qualify for the federal aid. It's easier to qualify for institutional aid. That's just a reality. So the notion that, you know, she wasn't sure if she could afford medical school. Come on, really. If you can't afford medical school, it's because you weren't that poor, right? It's the middle class, right, that really has that problem. But these two congresswomen could not be any further apart on the issues. And AOC says that she's, you know, maybe she could have a kid, right? And we talked about that night. I think her whole reasoning here, her rationale is crazy. But isn't it usually crazy? It usually is. Today, yesterday, she was talking about how there's an upside for Democrats that are voting uncommitted over Biden in primaries. She's insisting on it, in fact. Now, what's interesting here is that, you know, Biden is the guy. He's an incumbent president. But there are hundreds of thousands of progressives like her that are opting not to vote for President Biden in the primary because they don't like the way he's handling the war between Israel and Hamas. And I got to say, I think that's fantastic. I really do. Just imagine that. Hundreds of thousands of progressives. Imagine if I could get on this mic and say something like this. There are hundreds and thousands of conservatives that are not going to vote for the Republican whomever because they don't like the way we're handling spending. They don't like the way we're handling this. Right? Whatever the issue is. That's dedication. Now, I understand. That's the Marxist bent that the left has. That's them. They like to move in lockstep, right? They're all about hegemony. They're all about groupthink. They're not about individuality. That's what we are, and that's ultimately how they use things against us, right? They use your goodwill against you. They use your good nature against you. And this is why it's so difficult to battle the left, because you're just trying to do what's right. You know, most conservatives I know, they'll say something like, look, I'm just trying to go to work and pay my bills and go on 1 or 2 vacations a year. That's not, just listen to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, all out crazy. Just listen to her, right? I wish I could have gone to medical school, but, you know, I would have done that. You know, maybe I could have had a kid, right? Maybe I could have had a kid. She's basing climate change, student loans, the political state of affairs in life is how she views the world. Her worldview is one of politics. So if she doesn't have a kid, you're the one that's being blamed for it. Or the policy you support is the reason that she hasn't chosen to have a family. Now, I'm not going to be the one to break it to her. There's a lot of people that have kids in all sorts of situations, right? Some kids are born into poor families. I was very poor. I've actually stood on a line with my siblings and gone to the back of a truck and was given a block of government cheese. Back when there was a big dairy surplus, and Reagan said, "Bring it out to the hood," right? And they brought them out to all sorts of neighborhoods, and they were giving out cheese, blocks of government cheese all over the place. I know a thing or two about that. I wasn't poor enough to grow up in the projects, but poor enough to get some government cheese. And all I could say is, she says there's an upside to to voting uncommitted, like the people that are, none of the above. And I have to say, this might be an area where I agree with her. I think that's a powerful political tool. I think it's great to send a message to Biden or whoever you're trying to send the message to. I think that's key. You want to make a message. You want to have a voice. You want to have power. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. That's how we do it at the ballot box. So for once, maybe for once, AOC and I agree on something. Folks, your calls and more are coming up straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
At the core, inflation is about this. You have X number of things to sell and a lot more people to buy it or a lot more money chasing it. And so the only answer to that is you have to increase production or you have to raise interest rates to suck the money out of the economy. But who pays the interest rates? Well, the beneficiaries are the savers, but the people who get killed by it are people that have credit card debt or any debt. People are trying to buy a home, anything of that nature. And I think President Trump is absolutely right. At no time in the foreseeable future will interest rates be able to come down if this continues. And Biden sounds tone deaf. He's going out there. I think he stopped saying Bidenomics, but he's going out there bragging about stuff, and people are like, what is this guy talking about? This guy's out of his mind.
So that is Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. And I've always been a fan of Marco Rubio's. I really have. He's a terrific senator, and I love his position on statehood in Puerto Rico. It's a solid position that makes a lot of sense. And Joe Biden is presiding over an economy that I guess you really can give him some credit. You really can. And I'm going to probably regret saying this, but the reality is the amount of damage that Biden has put on our economy and has been able to resist, skirt, escape a flat-out recession, even though on paper we had it maybe once, but we're somewhat afloat, right? Unemployment is still relatively low, even though they're fudging the numbers on that. I would say that we should be in a way worse place. That doesn't mean we're not going to get there. I think we are. But what he's doing right now is screwing us over. Inflation will destroy this country. Something that E.J. Antoni, again, he was on this show last night, and he's talked about the bond market. And if we don't have people that will buy our debt because they know that when we pay them back plus 5%, that dollar is still worth less than when they bought the debt originally, because our inflation's higher than 5% in reality, not on paper. That's a problem. Anyway, folks, we're coming right back with an amazing topic. I'll tease it when we come back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of the program. If you want to give us a call, it's 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez, if you want to join us on the late night national town hall conversation. And a couple of things going on today. There was some hearings on Capitol Hill about free speech and media bias and et cetera, and fired CBS News reporter Catherine Herridge, who's an outstanding reporter. She accused CBS, the network, of quote-unquote journalistic rape for seizing her files. And this is a big deal. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. We're going to jump into that because I think it's a big story. I think she's fair. I think she's a heck of a reporter. And it's a shame that we don't have more like her. And it's a shame that the government is going this route, trying to get to her sources. But I understand. I understand the government's going to make the case that this is a national security issue and there was no other way. You know, we're preventing another 9/11 by going after. And this is how they do it. And I understand. I don't agree. I think that the role of the journalist is what's protected by the First Amendment. And the whole point of having a watchdog was a watchdog on the government. But we have allowed our government to we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. We have people, commentators on MSNBC, CNN, wherever it was, that the woman, I forget her name now, where she said that radical Christian conservatives believe, Christian nationalists, they believe that our rights come from God and not from the government. Now, again, this is not a story that my pastor told me. This is a story that I read myself. And the fact that these people don't read the founding documents, don't understand the founding of our country, and would make such brazen statements like they do, leads me to believe that I think we're up the creek without a paddle, but I don't want to be a pessimist. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. I also wanted to remind you, inflation is up, right? We talked about that at length yesterday, but I just want to remind you. Support from African-American men has now doubled in key swing states in favor of Donald Trump. That's a big deal. And let's see, the DOJ is now finding inconsistencies in District Attorney Funny Willis in her federal grant use with respect to the funds that she was given. So maybe she's going to get thrown under the bus. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. And of course, the gender crazy continues. There's still plenty more with the gender crazy stuff. And not too long ago, I saw this clip on I think I saw it on Instagram, but it was a TikTok clip, and it was of a transgender influencer that, trying to get people on board with their story. They put these videos out, and then in the comments, it just gets flooded with people praising them. Oh, good for you. You're so courageous. You're just fantastic. This is awesome. Speak your truth, live your life, live your best life. It's just these platitudes. It's just amazing to see how much support they get. You come out and say, hey, I'm married. I've been married for 50 years. You don't get as many kudos, right? Which is way harder to do. But I digress. The point I'm making here is I heard this clip and I thought, man, I'm going to play it for you guys. And I think I might have played it for you when I originally heard it. But we just pulled it out of the archive, and I want to replay it because I think it's so shocking. But what do I know? Listen to this.
I am trigender, which means like a triangle, I have 3 genders, male, female, and non-binary. And the difference between trigender and gender fluid is that I feel all 3 of these genders at the same time. All the time. It doesn't ever shift or change, or where I feel one gender more strongly than the other, like gender fluid tends to be. Also, I should recognize and accept that a lot of people don't see non-binary as a third gender. They see it as something completely separate from the binary of male and female. But for me, it's like a third gender. Or I guess you could call it a third identity.
A third identity, a third gender. It sounds like this woman is suffering more from multiple personality disorder than anything else. But I'm not a doctor and I'm not here to diagnose. But we're going to talk to somebody who is in a moment. And I want to bring your attention to this report that came out of the Netherlands recently. And very interesting, right? A 15-year study, and it concluded what a lot of people had already suspected, that being trans is usually just a phase for kids. Listen to this, 11% of adolescents reported being unhappy with their gender. 19% who reported unhappiness as kids no longer expressed it as adults. How about that? And this study tracked more than 2,700 kids ages 11 through their mid-20s, checking in with them every 3 years about their feelings regarding their gender. And I think this is a very powerful study because this is something I would have suspected, but I'm a layman. Now we have the actual scientists that are laying this out. And as you know, as Dr. Fauci says, you got to follow the science, right? So I want to follow the science with our guest, Dr. Jay Richards. He is with Heritage Foundation, and he's got an interesting take on this because he's director of the Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Life, Religion, and Family and the William E. Simon Senior Research Fellow at Heritage. Dr. Richards, welcome.
Thanks so much, Rich. Good to be with you.
My pleasure. So you heard this audio clip on the way into the segment of this woman that says that she believes she's trigender, not gender fluid. And again, creating all of these nuances within this world of hurt, in my opinion. And how did, you as someone that works in this, avidly involved, what is your reaction to hearing something like that?
Well, I always, when I hear kids say this, is I want to say, okay, well, define gender for me. What is this word that you're using? Because for so long we got used to thinking, most of us or lay people think, well, gender is just a synonym for sex. It's the word we're using to distinguish male and female. Right. That's how the word worked actually for several centuries. But what has happened here in the last few decades,
until recently.
Of course, yes, until recently, is that gender it becomes code for this different thing called a gender identity. And if you say, well, what's that? It's an internal sense of gender that doesn't actually have anything to do with sex. It doesn't have to do with your body. It's something that's in your head. And what's funny is that this young woman, it's obvious that's what she's saying. She's telling us about this thing that's in her head. And so it can be basically anything, right? And so non-binary, in a sense, it's supposed to be kind of both male and female or something like that. But that doesn't make any sense biologically. And so that's kind of a key thing to understand about gender ideology, is that it displaces sex, that is the reproductive strategy of humans and mammals and plants and animals, with this internal sense of gender, completely detached from biological reality. And that, I think, is becoming fairly obvious to most people that are, not fully sold on the ideology.
Dr. Jay Richards, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's really well put, your explanation, and I understand why. You're the scholar in residence over there now. You made that sound simple. It would have taken me a half hour to do that. But the reality is, you're right. This is an interesting thing that we've, I'm going to go with the word prostituted. We've prostituted or perverted the language. And we're at this place now where we're also perverting the ideology of those that are using this language. And the science is catching up to the popular culture hype. With this report, would you say this report is something solid? Is this something that you would consider peer-reviewed and it's of good scholarly merit, or is this like some sort of junk science?
It's definitely not a blog post or junk science. It's a really straightforward study. As you said, over a long period of time, this stuff is not normally done. What's interesting about it is that it more or less confirms what we already knew. So in this case, the study, you said about basically, according to this kind of longitudinal study, 74% of minors that identify as transgender or say that they're discontent with their gender. That's sort of how they track this. Maybe they have gender dysphoria. Maybe they're just uncomfortable in some way. If allowed to go through natural puberty, end up reconciling with their sexed bodies, as I would put it. What's funny is if you had read the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 way back in 2013, you can kind of run the numbers. And it said at the time that the vast majority of kids that have this as children if allowed to go through natural puberty, will reconcile with their bodies and get over this. So in other words, puberty for most kids is the solution to these feelings. And yet with this crazy experiment with so-called gender-affirming care, what we're actually doing is fast-tracking kids, the social transitioning and puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, to lock them into something that was probably a temporary psychological state that with some good counseling and love and watchful waiting, they would have actually grown out of, which is what makes this doubly tragic.
Tragic is an understatement. The amount of suicide that comes out of this, it's really heartbreaking. Folks, we're on with Dr. Jay Richards, PhD. He is the director of the DeVos Center for Life, Religion, and Family at the Heritage Foundation. And we're going to continue this discussion against what they call gender-affirming care. I call crazy. And we're going to do that straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There is more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. We continue our conversation with Dr. Jay Richards from the Heritage Foundation, and I want to bring our attention to a separate report by Dr. Hilary Cass out of the United Kingdom in London. And on April 1st, doctors in England's public health system stopped prescribing puberty blockers and hormones to children and young people with gender dysphoria. Now, this decision came after recommendations that Cass made in the interim report that I just talked about. And to help us break that down, I want to come back to Dr. Richards. Tell us about the report and help us understand what's going on. It sounds like a good step forward.
It is. In fact, it's one of the most important developments if you're sort of tracking the scientific research for this thing that's euphemistically called gender-affirming care, which is really sex-denying interventions of children's bodies. The interim report, led by a prominent pediatrician in the UK named Hilary Cass, had already sort of indicated where they were going. But those of us that track this stuff have actually been waiting for the final Cass review to be issued. And that just happened literally about 48 hours ago. It was actually really breaking. I mean, and I'll tell you how tough this is. The 388-page report, and it's accompanied by 9 separate systematic reviews of different aspects of the evidence of this that are published in BMJ, which is a prominent medical journal, simultaneously. So to compare this to, say, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is all in on so-called gender-affirming care and has these guidelines saying that we should do this to kids, they have exactly 0 systematic reviews of the evidence, and they're issuing the guidelines. Well, the NHS, so the National Health Service in the UK, they noticed this massive increase in the number of kids being referred to the pediatric gender clinic in the UK. In fact, it was something like 4,000% increase from 2009 2019, and they thought, well, this is strange. I mean, what is there a virus going around that causes kids to become gender dysphoric? Something's happening. So that's why they did this. They said something weird seems to be happening. Maybe we need to look to see if this actually helps kids. Does it improve their outcomes? Does it improve their thoughts of suicide? Does it make them more mentally healthy? And so that's what this was about. And so this is just about as rigorous and dispassionate and scientific as something could possibly be. And the final result is essentially what those of us that are critics of these procedures have been saying all along. There's just no good evidence that this actually helps kids. Most of this stuff seems to be driven by ideology. They actually criticize American physicians for helping sort of popularize this around the world. And as a result, I mean, the practical effect of this in the UK is going to be the cessation of puberty blockers, specifically for kids for the most part. They're also looking at cross-sex hormones, which I think are going to be discontinued. The UK wasn't doing surgery on kids like we do here, so that's sort of off the table. And then they also talked about social transitioning, which they treat as a medical intervention. So in other words, if you change a kid's pronouns and tell them they can go in the opposite sex bathroom and all that stuff, that tends to set them on a path to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And the other thing that they do in this report is they say, okay, now we also need to look at the age 18 to 25 because we're seeing the same kind of dynamic there. The problem is they could not get adult clinics, with the exception of one, to actually cooperate with them. So now the National Health Service is going to basically have to say, okay, look, we're going to look at adults ages 18 to 25 next. But this is absolutely huge. And any American commentator that claims that there's a kind of scientific consensus in favor of gender-affirming care is either lying or they are unable to read international news. That's the only thing I can say.
That's a lot. And you know, for me, one of the most shocking things that I just heard was that we are to the left or more progressive or more egregious, if you will, in this process than the Europeans, where we're actually doing surgery and they're not. That's crazy.
That's right. It is.
They usually are 10 steps ahead of us.
No, exactly. And if you think about it, there's actually Northern European countries that started this a little before us. It started in the Netherlands, but it was actually Sweden and Finland that led the way in rethinking this. The UK has been in a kind of a slow process of doing that. Now it looks like Norway and Denmark are moving in that direction. They've always been, in those countries, have been a little more conservative than us on these things, but part of the issue is that the U.S.'s freedom has allowed for freedom for individual clinics to explode. There's about 79 of these pediatric gender clinics. And then the Planned Parenthood clinics. There are about 600 Planned Parenthood facilities in this country, and almost all of them are now dispensing cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers to kids, sometimes on the very first appointment and without a psych evaluation. So it's just complete insanity, unfortunately, on this stuff in the U.S.
Wow. Now, Dr. Jay Richards, we've got about a minute to go. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to keep up to speed with the work that you're doing and learn how they could support you and follow your work. Let everybody know how they can do that.
Absolutely. If you want, I am very active on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Dr. J. Richards, and you can find my work and my colleagues at the Heritage Foundation website, heritage.org. And anyone really interested in this, I recommend they go to segm.org, segm.org, Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine.org, for really good analysis of all this stuff.
Outstanding. Dr. Jay Richards, I want to thank you. And let me ask you, do you think, in the last 30 seconds we have, do you think that we would, do you think we get better from this? Or, do these things impact what we're doing in the United States? Or does the left double down and say, oh, no, forget about the Europeans. They're, they're going to the right. We got it full speed ahead. And, what do you think happens here?
I think that the gender ideologues will try to do that. I think already there are rumblings probably inside the White House with the political people saying, look, how do we draw down from this? Because it's a big loser for the left long term.
I like the way that sounds. Dr. Jay Richards from the Heritage Foundation, thank you, sir. I appreciate you being here. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed.
Thanks so much, Rich.
You bet. All right, folks, we're coming right back. We're going to continue our discussion. Don't go anywhere. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Last question. Can you help me understand one thing? Yesterday, the president made very clear that the U.S.'s commitment to Israel is, in his words, he said it twice, ironclad. How can the U.S.'s commitment to Israel be, quote, ironclad when in the statement released on behalf of the White House last week after his conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that the U.S. would reassess its policy as it relates to Israel, given the way it prosecutes the war in Gaza?
So
it can be ironclad and be reassessed.
Look, this is an important relationship that we have with Israel. It is they are our friends. And we have always said that we are committed to make sure that Israel's security, especially against these threats that we're hearing from Iran, that they are protected. And that is ironclad. We've always been consistent there. And we're going to continue to be very clear about that. The president made sure to put that at the top of his press conference because he wanted to continue that message, continue the message of making sure that America, we support Israel's security, especially against these threats that we're hearing from Iran and also their proxies. And so that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed. That is Karine Jean-Pierre, KJP, the White House press secretary, speaking in circles and saying really nothing of any consequence with respect to Biden and the craziness that he's enabled and allowed to ensue in the Middle East, in my humble opinion. When she's asked how Biden's support for Israel can be both ironclad and reassessed, and she's saying nothing's changing. But it's clear to me that Biden is all but leaving the Israelis, out to dry. But somebody who has a better understanding of this than me is Colonel John Mills. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and a national security professional with service in 5 eras: the Cold War, the peace dividend, the war on terror. And now he's here to help us understand how we can fight and save our republic. He's a former director of cybersecurity policy and strategy and international affairs at the Department of Defense. And he's our guest right now. Colonel, welcome.
Hey, Rich, an honor to be on your show again.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's an honor to have you back. And I want to get your take on this because, I mean, it seems like, there's news, but then there's no news. And even though there's updates, a lot of this just doesn't change, right? It seems like Biden just keeps doing what he has to do, the bare minimum with Israel, and then saying, we're going to help out with humanitarian aid with Hamas, and doing nothing to really lead, as America typically does, with this conflict. What are your thoughts?
Well, the most humanitarian thing to do to ease the most suffering is to eliminate Hamas. That's the humanitarian thing to do. And instead, you have an administration wanting to micromanage a very capable foreign military that is a key strategic partner to America. And essentially, like Lyndon Johnson selecting the daily bombing missions in North Vietnam up until 1968, they want to micromanage this with a 10,000-mile screwdriver from Washington, D.C. This is just absolute theater of the absurd. They're doing this solely because the pushback they're getting from their radicals that hate America anyway, and a bunch of them were shouting death to America in Detroit the other day. Sounds like an insurrection to me. This is not the way a strategic partner is treated, especially after they had 1,300 plus citizens raped, slaughtered, tortured, and kidnapped. We should be helping them, and the humane thing is to destroy Hamas, which is a terrorist group, and has subjugated the people of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, Colonel, I think that's well put, and I agree with you 100%. Now, obviously, there are elements within our government from different places, the national security establishment, the military establishment, the political establishment, that have differing views on this and all have, in my opinion, a different dog in the fight. When Biden is seemingly, trying to figure out which way to go with this, do you think he's succumbing to the pressures of these different groups that have different desires and outcomes or desired outcomes? Or do you think this is really just him saying, all right, well, these guys are pushing harder now, I'm going to go with them. But, next week we'll go with those guys so they don't feel jealous. And that's why he's kind of all over the place and nowhere at the same time.
Well, he's consistent. He has been consistently wrong on everything, according to former Secretary of Defense Gates. Yeah. When you have no known moral starting point, you kind of do whatever. You just kind of flounder through life because you're just going to do. I mean, if you want to take money from the Chinese before and maybe even while being sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, you're just going to do whatever you want to do, and it's not even as sophisticated as Clintonian triangulation of the voting patterns. You're just reacting, and you got KJP, probably the worst press secretary ever, who is in over her head in a puddle of water. She just has no credibility. Jake Sullivan, our national security advisor, has no credibility. I don't think Biden even half the time knows that he's encumbering the White House. And again, he has a son who's taking, and the big guy took money directly from China, and that's been validated by the suspicious activity reports and other law enforcement evidence, which charges should be brought. So this is this administration doesn't know what they're doing because they have no moral foundation or starting point. So they just kind of flounder through a disaster to disaster, and which is what essentially Biden did from when he cut funding to the South Vietnamese and let South Vietnam fall, which how many years later he just let Afghanistan cut and ran from Afghanistan, creating a slaughter, and he was one of the key votes that, abandoned the Panama Canal. I mean, he's been consistent in being the worst decision maker ever, but you can get away with that as a senator. And now, unfortunately, he's in the White House for the time being.
Right. Folks, we're on with Colonel John Mills, Senior Fellow at the Center for Security Policy and former Director of Cybersecurity Policy Strategy and International Affairs at the Department of Defense. And Colonel Mills has authored the book, The War Against the Deep State. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. I also want to get your take on Ukraine and Russia. There's a lot of different opinions. I have my own, and I'm trying to get a good assessment on those, so we'll talk about that as well. Plus, your calls are coming up after that, folks. 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Ukraine does not ask too much. We need air defense systems and fighter aircraft that can protect our cities from Russian terror. Few dozens of systems and a sufficient number of modern jets. And there will be no problem of Russian jets and bombs.
That is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky making an appeal for more weapons and air power, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a big debate in Congress, Colonel Mills. There's obviously some members of Congress that are saying not a single penny, we don't want to do it, or we're not doing it unless you fund, you do take action at the border. And my position is, look, I do believe that we have to help Ukraine. I don't know that we can help them in perpetuity financially. I think, we can give them some guns. We have to make some deals. President Trump has floated the idea of maybe doing a loan program, kind of like Lend-Lease back in the days. I think these are all viable options. But what do you think the path forward looks like?
That's a great question, Rich. My policy has always been consistent. They need enough resources for equivalency. That was achieved probably about 18 months ago. Since then, my policy has also been consistent. No further aid until a dedicated, not a dual-headed DOD Inspector General, a dedicated Inspector General for investigation of all resources going to Ukraine, securing the southern border, replenishment of our own war stocks, and also ensuring absolute readiness in the Pacific, and release of the J6ers. So there we go. That's my position. This has become an absolute freak show of money being thrown over the transom with no accountability. And again, I want a fair fight, and I think we achieved that a while ago. The Ukrainians have shown they have mastered, they have shut down the Russian Air Force, they have obliterated the Russian Navy, and essentially it's a standstill on the ground. Now, over the last couple of months, there was beginning to be the appearances of some Russian tactical movement on the ground, but that has effectively been stopped. And one of the reasons why that has been stopped, now we tried to surge. It was just a Wall Street Journal article today. It was fascinating. And I know a lot of these details, but we gave them a lot of our small drones, the new generation of new DJI-like American drones. Only one problem. They were finding them clunky, unreliable, and expensive. And these really trace to the Department of Defense started a blue UAS program to restart American small drone production in America after it had been obliterated by China and DJI. The only problem with that program is if you study those, all the piece parts are still coming from China. So is China giving us bad stuff? But here's it's even worse and shows what's going on in Ukraine is guess who the Ukrainians turned to for drones to stop the Russian tanks? China. Mm-hmm. Guess who is the leading arms provider to Russia for the war against the Ukrainians? China. Who is benefiting from the absolute bloodshed in Ukraine? China. This is ridiculous. China is now arming both sides of the conflict. I mean, it doesn't get any more Machiavellian than that. And this after Putin signed an agreement with his boss, Chairman Xi of the Chinese Communist Party in fall of 2021, the no limits agreement to topple America, China and its tributary states of Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela. And now China is killing its own partner and supplying Ukraine. I mean, supplying Ukraine and supplying arms to Russia. Totally Machiavellian, but that's the totality. They couldn't care less. They'll wipe out their own ally, so they don't have to have any of their own people killed. So this is a very messy situation in Ukraine. It's effectively at a standstill on the ground now because of the drone surge from China. But again, I mean, it just. Poor U.S. leadership. I think in the end, it's going to have to transition into some negotiations. I know the Ukrainians are not going to like that, and again, I think Russia started this. I know there's a lot of concern and there's a lot of reality to the corruption, concerns with Zelensky, World Economic Forum. Yes. But in the end, Russia still started this, so. We're essentially at a standstill on the ground, and what was beginning to look like slight forward move by Russia has been obliterated by drones from their boss, China.
This is a fascinating analysis, Colonel, and both from the conditions that you would position with the dedicated Inspector General to everything that you've laid out. This is probably one of the most concise responses I've gotten, and I really appreciate it. My thinking on something like this, and I really want to understand it because it could just be me having a fear-based reaction and my own disdain for Putin. But I feel if we do say, okay, we have an Inspector General that's going to do this and stop the presses, we're not helping, that kind of signals to Russia, well, they're not going to have their back for at least, for the next 8 weeks, 10 weeks while they figure this thing out. So do what you got to do. And it opens up this opportunity for Russia to say, hey, look, we need to beef up a few things. Call my friend Xi Jinping, and maybe he could help us out. Maybe we can score a deal here, all while we're trying to figure out our internal workings. And again, at no fault of our own. I mean, you have to be responsible. But I just think, is that a reality? Is that just me pie in the sky thinking? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's been some concerns that Putin has reconstituted forces. I'm not sure I totally buy that. Russia does not have Russia has a population problem. They are a shrinking population. They're not making babies. This is not World War II where they can just slaughter millions of their own people and they don't care. They don't have the population base. Pyramid is destroyed and they are shrinking. So I don't, but what I'm also concerned about is extremely provocative talk from the NATO, I think it was the NATO Secretary General and some others who were saying, oh, yes, Ukraine will become part of NATO. Whoa. That was never part of the equation. And that is, I would suggest, unnecessarily provocative. Russia also has nuclear weapons. I am not a Russia hater. I am not a Russia friend. They are a country we have to deal with, and we should not go out of our way to seek conflict. But at the same time, Putin is a thug, and Russia is a problem. I mean, they've always been a problem, and they have some serious mental psychological issues with their view of the world and paranoia and totalitarian leaderships from pre-Tsar days, Tsar days, Soviet days. But I think I just don't know how much gas they have in the tank left for Russia to go further. But what I am concerned is if we are unnecessarily provocative, they will use the nuclear option. And I think one of the likely things is for them to not go after Ukraine, but is to push through Belarus, which is their partner and friend, and cross that gap where they would have to occupy Polish territory and Lithuanian territory to their enclave in Kaliningrad and create that land bridge. That would trigger Article 5 and World War. So this is, we have to be very, very careful about this. We don't need to coddle
Big
Putin,
deal.
but we don't need to provoke him either. And I mean, he's
Colonel,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to pause here. We have to take a commercial break. We're coming right back. And you're right. We don't want to coddle Putin or provoke him. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with Colonel John Mills.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, folks, if you're enjoying the conversation with Colonel John Mills, you got to get at least 2 copies of his brand new book, War Against the Deep State. It's available on Amazon. I recommend getting a copy for yourself and a copy for someone else. Colonel, let everybody know how they can get a copy of the book, how they can follow you and keep up to speed with the amazing work you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Rich. Colonel Ret John, Colonel R.E.T. John, Substack, Getter, and Truth. And the book, War Against the Deep State, a signed copy, also my previous book, The Nation Will Fall, signed copies available on my store. So if you want signed copies, go to my store, look up War Against the Deep State, or just unsigned, go straight to Amazon. Thank you, Rich.
mystore.com, excellent site, by the way. Outstanding. I hope everybody gets, like I said, at least 2 copies of the book, one for yourself, one to give away to a friend so they can be up to speed on what's going on with the deep state and how this war against the deep state is going to unfold. Colonel John Mills, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I want to thank you for staying up late with us tonight. Godspeed to you, sir.
Thank you, Rich.
You bet. Folks, we continue with Open Phone America, where we talk to you about what's going on in America at night. So give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Open Phone America starts in T-minus, 7.5 or 8 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Open Phone America starts right now.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, Here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. We call it Open Phone America. It's a time-tested tradition, time-honored tradition here on the program, started by Larry King, continued by the late, great Jim Bohannon. God rest their souls. And speaking of souls, we lost one today. And again, this is not an homage. I've been taking heat because I said R.I.P. OJ. That was it. 5 letters. 5 letters, and people are like, how dare you? This man's a murderer. Listen, it wasn't like I was holding a vigil for Osama bin Laden. I just said R.I.P. OJ, and mainly, honestly, tongue-in-cheek, because he himself was like, no, I'm not in hospice. I'm great. I'm thinking what I'm doing for the Super Bowl. And that was 60 days ago, and he's gone today. And that was really the premise of my tweet on that. But some people fail to see my dark humor at times. So it's all right. I'll let it slide. Anyway, OJ's dead. We have a report on that, and it's probably about a minute long, maybe a little more. I'll let you hear it in a second. But I want to also just take a quick moment before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the program to thank Talkers Magazine, talkers.com. They have the annual Heavy 100 list. It's a talk radio listing, a ranking of what they call the most important 100, the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America. And I was added to this list last year, honored to be there last year. I'm on the list again this year, and I can't help but thank every one of you that's listening to the program. And we moved it up, I think, 7 spots on the ranking. So thank you to everybody that's listening, both critics and friends. Couldn't have done it without you. One of the 100 most important talk radio hosts in America. Who would have thunk it? Kid from Brooklyn, Puerto Rican kid from Brooklyn. God bless America. Anyway, speaking of America, let's talk about Orange Juice Simpson, who was accused of killing his wife, and then Dershowitz and Shapiro and Johnny Cochran, they got him off the Dream Team, right? They got him off because if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. And, of course, there was evidence that was planted. The cop was like a racist. It was just a crazy thing. And voila, they screwed up the case, and he walked away. And many people think that he walked away a murderer, an unconvicted murderer. One juror came forward and said that she, in fact, voted to acquit O.J. Simpson because in direct retaliation for what Reginald Denny did to Rodney King. And this was retribution of that attack. So whatever the reasons be, that's how that went down. And I want you to hear what ABC News had to say about O.J.
O.J. Simpson has died at the age of 76. The former football superstar, winner of the Heisman Trophy at USC, had an 11-year career in the NFL, most of it spent as a star running back with the Buffalo Bills. With athletic ability and star quality, he became one of the first black athletes to win off the field in lucrative endorsements. He starred in commercials, on TV, and in movies, creating a celebrity lifestyle. But that changed in June 1994 when Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, was found brutally murdered. She'd been stabbed repeatedly. Her throat was slit. Her friend, Ronald Goldman, was also repeatedly stabbed to death. Simpson quickly became a suspect, and after the now infamous white Bronco slow-speed chase, which was carried live on TV stations around the country, he was arrested and charged with both murders. The 9-month murder trial, broadcast to millions, referred to as the trial of the century. 2 years later, sued in civil court by the parents of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, Simpson was found liable for those deaths. His assets were seized, and he was ordered to pay $33.5 million in restitution to both victims' families.
And this thing went on and on and on and on. And it still goes on today, right? There's still conversation about O.J. and the civil cases, and he lost on the civil case. He won on the criminal case. Then he got in trouble for the memorabilia. Then he robbed the memorabilia that was robbed from him. I mean, it's been a very eventful life and story and saga for O.J. Simpson. And I want to get your thoughts on that stuff because I remember 1995, I think that was my first my first car chase on TV that I saw on the news, the white Bronco. I think that was my junior year of high school. And I remember it was the coolest thing ever. It was like a live, unending wall-to-wall coverage of, looked like a Cops episode. So let us go to the phones and let's check in with our buddy Jerome, Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA. Jerome, go right ahead.
When I saw that Bronco chase, I knew he was guilty.
Yeah. Who runs away like that?
I haven't changed my mind not one time since then. When I saw him sitting in that courtroom behind all those lawyers and not wanting to testify, I knew he was guilty. There's nothing anyone could tell me to convince me otherwise. And I've heard people say, "Oh no, he's innocent," and I would just look at them and say, "You are the dumbest piece of what on this planet to think that he would be innocent or something like that."
Jerome, it seemed to me the same way. Honestly, I looked at that and I thought exactly the same thing. I thought, man, this guy literally is trying to get away with murder because he's a superstar. He was in the movies. He was everywhere. Everybody loved the juice. And, lost his mind when he lost his woman and decided to do the unthinkable. And then, tries to, get away with it. And then he gets into it with the cop and the cop tries to set him up. And that's really, I think, the downfall of the prosecution, what happened there. And you're right. He was willing to testify. And it was Dershowitz, who's been a guest on this program, Alan Dershowitz, who said, no, you can't testify. And he doubled down on that with the other attorneys, Bob Shapiro and Johnny Cochran, when they decided to allow him to try on the glove right in front of the jury. Once he did that and the jury saw that he couldn't get his hand in, A, because he had a latex glove on, and B, because many think that the leather glove had shrunk a little bit because it was like in a climate-controlled cold storage, that there was some shrinkage there, and he couldn't get his hand in. And voila, they said, you know what? Everybody saw what you had to say without you saying anything. By putting on the glove, let us do the talking. You don't have to testify. And that ended up being a victory for him. Whereas in his civil trial, he did take the stand, and he ended up losing that one. So I think you're right on this one. It seemed that way to me from the evidence. Again, I wasn't there and I don't know, and the whole thing is horrible. But it definitely seemed like he did the wrong thing. And the fact that he ran away, and he ran away forever. Like, it was kind of like, where are you going, sir? I don't know. Jerome, thank you for your call, my brother. I appreciate it. Good to hear from you. Jerome in South Carolina, WTMA. Let us continue with your calls when we return. The phone number is 833-482-5337. Did OJ do it? Did he not do it? And if you want to weigh in on any of the topics that we discussed this evening, whether it was the new report that says transgender gender dysphoria, is a temporary thing for kids, feel free. You could weigh in on that one too. I didn't mean to be insensitive earlier when we were talking about that. I said it was crazy. It's a crazy concept to me. I realize some of our listeners are transgender, and I don't want to come across as insensitive. Anyway, we have that on the table as well as the multifaceted wars that we have in the Middle East and in Europe. So plenty to discuss tonight. 833-482-5337. I see we have calls from Idaho, from Arkansas, and more coming in. Maine. Big shout out to everybody in Maine that's calling in. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 5337 833-4-VALDES. That's Valdez with an S.
I've been asked to comment on the death of O.J. Simpson. Foremost, I'd like to express my condolences to the children, to Sydney and to Justin, to Jason and Arnell. They lost their father, and that is never easy. I wish to express my love and compassion to the Goldmans, to Fred and to Kim. I hope you find closure. And finally, to the family of the beautiful Nicole Brown Simpson. May we always cherish her memories. Nicole was a beacon of light that burned bright. May we never forget her.
All right, that's Cato Kalin. He was the, I don't know, I guess a valet of sorts that lived in the house. He released this video on social media today reacting to the death of O.J. Simpson and, of course, his late wife. And this is an interesting thing, right? I mean, this is one of those cases that everybody just had an opinion on. And again, I was in high school at the time, and I followed the news sparingly at the time. It was just such a huge thing because this predated this thing that we use now called the internet and social media and cell phones, and none of that stuff was really a thing. I mean, some people had those big bag phones at that time. We're just moving into those really big battery Motorola flip phones. And of course the expensive cars that had the like screwed in installed big phones with the numbers on the back of them and that big antenna off the back of the car. But that wasn't a thing back then. So it was TV. Everybody watched TV, and it was all over TV. It was all over radio. And as a teenager, I remember seeing this stuff. So it was a crazy time and a huge story. And they did dub it as the trial of the century, and it lasted forever, in my opinion. I feel like I grew up watching that stuff. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on this stuff. Do you think OJ was innocent? Do you think he's guilty? Your thoughts on all of this? Let's go to Arkansas. Check in with our buddy Joe. Joe is in Salem, Arkansas on KSAR. Joe, go right ahead.
Rich, I have to agree with Jerome that he was probably guilty. Mm-hmm. And however, this is one of the biggest American stories ever, which probably Lee Habib wouldn't want to run. But it's definitely, it kept me glued to the TV all that time. Now, I agree with you when you opened the show about having a little forgiveness and mercy on the dead. And this man who he just went into a rage, and he had to have immediate satisfaction about his wife and Ron Goldman, committing adultery. And for centuries, that has been excusable almost to slay the woman and the man. However, I don't agree with it. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And, he took vengeance into his own hands, and it ruined his life. And, there's a life expectation after the flood of Genesis 6:3 of living 120 years. But for really crappy life, in the New Testament, it talks about 70. Right. And so he only made 6 extra years after that. And look at all the suffering of his children, and his life just did not go well at all. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on it.
That's a fair point. And yeah, I think we need to, and again, not with OJ in particular, just in general for me, from doing radio, I know every time there's a death, people call in. I remember when Don Imus died, and this is a guy that worked on a radio station that I worked at as well. And he had retired right around the time that I started there. But it was a story that broke while I was on the air one night. And I remember just people had mixed feelings about it, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to an opinion. But I just thought, if somebody's dead, their family is grieving. You may not have liked that person, but it doesn't mean that you need to hate their entire family. And that's why I say, they're dead. The worst has happened, right? They're not here anymore. So there's no point in me, kicking somebody while they're down when they're literally so down they're dead, right? And that's really where I'm at. And I just thought it was a little rough that, some of the folks on Twitter were just like, how could you say R.I.P. to OJ? It wasn't like I was, offering extended condolences. I don't know him and I don't know his family. I just said R.I.P. OJ because he had a video saying, no, I'm not in hospice. I'm not going anywhere. I'm throwing a Super Bowl party, and here he is dead. And I just thought that was ironic. But I agree with you that, when you're wrong, right? And I agree with me when I say I think we just have to let bygones be bygones at some point. When people are dead, what are we going to do? Drag them through the mud? I think ultimately it looks worse on us than it looks on them. Joe, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. Let's see. Where do we go here? We continue. Let us go to Zanesville, Ohio, and check in with our buddy Paul on WHIZ. Paul, go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, Rich. Yeah, although O.J. Simpson, he was a heck of a good football player. He was actually a pretty good actor, too. Seen some comedy films with him and everything. But, I think it looked to me like in the trial there that he felt he was beyond reproach, blameless, faultless. But I got news for him. He's going to meet his maker now. He's probably in line standing up there because I say guilty. And I have several relatives of color who's like, oh no, he didn't do it. But after watching that, the facts were there, and I think he was guilty. I feel so sorry for the Goldman family, and President Biden calls up and wishes his condolences to the Simpson family. I don't know. I mean, that's okay, but he never called and said anything to the Goldmans or anything. And, that's just how I kind of took it. This seemed to me like O.J. Simpson, and it kind of relates to Hollywood. These people that have all this money and everything, in Hollywood and everything, they just think they're beyond reproach. And I'd like your opinion, Rich.
Sure. Well, what I'll say to that is I think people, when they get power, the Machiavellian idea that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, is a real thing. It can get to people. I think we've seen that in many times in our respective lives. Well, as far as Biden, listen, I'll throw stones at him as much as I can while he's alive. But what I'll say to that is, I don't know what Biden did when Ron Goldman was killed, a million years ago. I know that Simpson died today, so he offered condolences to the Simpson family. Whether he did or didn't when he was a senator remains to be seen for me. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I can't hold that one on Biden because, it wasn't new, right? New news. It was old news. And the new news was that OJ's gone. So I think the news on OJ and, of course, the news with his once friend, Caitlyn Jenner, formerly Bruce Jenner, that is also was a big news story, I thought. I saw it everywhere. Bruce Jenner tweeting good riddance. And I think that says a lot. Paul, those are my thoughts.
He's going to meet his maker now. So it doesn't matter. He's going to go up or down, the way I feel about it. So, his time has come. That's just the way. Hey, I'm faithful. I'm a faithful person. I believe in God. So, that's the way I feel.
Sounds good to me, brother. And you know what? There's an account on Twitter that is called Satan. And Satan tweeted after OJ died, he's here. I'm not making that up. That actually happened. It's on Twitter. Check it out. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
Call now 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
O.J. Simpson in a knit cap from 2 blocks away is still O.J. Simpson. It's no disguise. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
That is Dream Team lawyer Johnny Cochran with his probably the most famous quote of his career, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. I remember hearing that, and I've been hearing it for years since, the famous words of Johnny Cochran. And I want to continue with your calls. Is this Guilty? Is he innocent? Did he get a raw deal? Did he get a fair deal? Excuse me. Let's go to Portland, Maine, WLOB. Eric, go right ahead.
Yes, I'm a little older than you. I remember watching the football in the 70s a lot, and you never heard a bad word about him. And then when this thing happened, they made reference to that the police knew he had a track record of assault against his first wife and, later on Nicole. But they kind of did a good job on concealing what was going on with him in I guess, real life, because you never heard a bad word about him at all. I don't remember hearing anything negative about him at all.
Right. They managed the public relations part of it pretty well. Well, I guess back then you just had like the Hollywood Reporter, Page 6, maybe Variety. There wasn't a ton of outlets like TMZ today, which is, all over social media, all over the internet and whatnot. And what do you think? Do you think was he guilty or not?
It looks like he was guilty. I would have thought they didn't really pursue it afterwards. One other thing I wanted to say was I remember at that time, Thanksgiving Day, 1977, Walter Payton broke his single game rushing record that he had set the previous year. So he was on Saturday Night Live with the cast there, like they were in a skit watching the game, and then he would run out. They would try to console him, and he would say, "Oh no, I love Walter Payton. I love this. It's great for the game." Then he would run out into the kitchen to get popcorn or something, and he would have a voodoo doll with Walter Payton, and he would be like flashing it and trying to cut it and stick it in the oven, and just kind of cut the eyes out of it, and he would go back and forth and trying to destroy this thing. And I wonder if that was always on the Best of Saturday Night Live for many, many years, and through the 80s. I wonder if they ever put that skit in any of the other later on, if they tried to.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but it does sound really funny. Eric, thank you for your call. Portland, Maine, WLOB. I appreciate it, Eric. And let's see, where do we go from here? We continue. Let's go. Let's go to Tom, Akron, Ohio, WNIR. Go right ahead.
Good morning, John.
I'm not John. I'm Rich, but buenos dias. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Rich. I'm still, sorry. I just got done working, and I'm kind of still, my mind's still on work hours. Thank you for taking my call. It's nice to finally get a chance to talk to you.
Likewise. What do you think about O.J. Simpson?
A prayer for Nicole and for Ron. Okay, they've been beyond our reach and supplication for nearly 30 years now.
Yeah.
A man now finally faces his ultimate judgment. All things, all things in perspective. I'm a retired paramedic. I'm finally finishing up my career here. And the fact is that domestic violence has been a thing. It's not something, it was happening long before the month of May of 1994. And it's, continues to be a problem in this country. So it's one of those things we have to address. But that would be for another show. I mean, that would take a whole week of shows to get over it, to discuss that subject. What happened in this case is, from the Northeast Ohio and Cleveland perspective, F. Lee Bailey did exactly what the Dream Team was designed and, compelled to do, was to put enough reasonable doubt into any jurist's mind and any public, the public opinion. He started off, he teed off with Detective Furman, because Furman claimed, I never, anytime you say under oath, I never or I always, guess what? You're setting yourself up for not just near trouble. You're basically you're tempting perjury. And when he made the claim that he never did, and they gave him every chance to adjust his statements, to modify his statements, and when they came back with all the witnesses, with all the quotes, even with video and tape, that was their lead witness, and he's completely discredited.
Yeah, I think you're right. When the jury has had so much influence from the media, and this thing was all over the media. it was very difficult for I think to him to find people that were kind of not exposed to the case. I know they kept the jury kind of away from everything, and ultimately he won. So, what I'm saying is probably proven wrong by this, but I still believe after hearing the jurors come forward afterwards, them saying that they did this in retaliation and whatnot, makes sense to me. And I think the other part of this that is a really big deal that some of us may forget whether he actually was guilty or innocent. They actually did prove that the cops planted evidence. I think at that point, you throw everything out. And it's like, shame on you for screwing this up. This could have been a slam dunk the other way. But now we can't have this slam dunk because you decided to pour blood on the carpet or pour blood on the sock or whatever it was they poured blood on that came from a non-human source, and they were able to prove that. And ultimately, I think that when they could prove that the cops tampered with the evidence to add evidence that didn't exist, at that point, it's time for people to say, you know what? No problem. So I think that's how that ends up. Tom, Akron, Ohio, WNIR, thank you for your call. Folks, take a quick pause right here. We come back with the rest of your calls and more. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's me, Rich Valdez, keeping you company straight till 1 a.m. And again, I mentioned earlier, I wanted to thank Talkers Magazine, Michael Harrison, the editor in charge over there. Great publication, and grateful that they included me in their 100 most important radio hosts in America. What an honor. And I'm going to be celebrating this weekend in Florida. So wish me luck while I'm doing that. And we continue with your calls. We're talking about O.J. Simpson and anything else. I'll get to some other topics as well. But there's a lot of interest in the O.J. Simpson topic, and I want to get to that. Let us go to Mike, Harpswell, Maine, WLOB. Go right ahead.
Rich, there's a little background story that happened 3 months before the murder. NBC had just got through filming a pilot for a new TV series called Frogmen. Now, Frogmen was the original name of the Navy SEALs.
Right.
They were known as Navy Frogmen. So in this, basically what they were looking for was a 1990s version of the A-Team. And basically, this was all about one SEAL team. They went around doing covert missions. They were based in Miami. That was the show, what it was supposed to be about.
Right.
And one of the stars in the show was called John Bullfrog Burke. And his specialty was he was a specialist with knives. Now, guess who the star was?
O.J. Simpson.
Simpson. Absolutely. And because of this part, he had taken training in knife fighting for the part. And Todd Allen, who was his co-star, one day when they were when they had stopped filming, he went with O.J. to a place called the Ross Cutlery Store, where O.J. purchased a knife. Now, to this day, the police believe that was the knife used in the murder, but it was never found. Now, the prosecutors wanted to bring in and use some of this footage at trial in the background about the knife fighting training. But Judge Ito found it was too prejudicial and never let it in. But yeah, there's a little background there that I didn't know about until I was wised up by somebody else.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know about that either. And I could see how the judge was on the fence about that because, I don't know. I say some things that are kind of crazy on the radio, and I do mean, I think, everything I say on the radio. But, I could imagine them saying, I got audio of Rich saying blah, 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 and trying to take it out of context or something. So I would, if I was in that predicament, I'm sure my lawyers would be like, no, we're not doing that. That has nothing to do with what actually happened. And I could see why they didn't use it. But, yeah, fascinating story. I had no idea about any of that happening. Thank you for the background there, Mike in Harpswell, Maine. Big shout out to everybody in Maine, WLOB. And thank you for the call, Mike. Let me see. Where do we go? We continue. Where was this call here? Let's go to Norman calling from Ontario, California, listening online, richvaldez.com. Norman, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, how are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
You and I, we used to speak on Facebook, and I wanted to call you.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I got a lot of issues, I tell you. You keep me up half the night.
I'm glad. It's funny. I was doing a TV show on Newsmax yesterday called Wise Guys with my buddy John Tobacco. And as part of his introduction, he says, and we have Rich Valdez, host of America at Night. You could hear him on stations all across the country, and he's either keeping you up or putting you to sleep. And I said, that's a pretty accurate depiction. That's the response I get from people who listen to the show. So, Norman, thank you. You're in Ontario, California, or in
I'm
Canada?
in Ontario, Canada.
Oh,
it's
okay, cool.
Over. It's a small town on the lake area near Erie, Pennsylvania.
Cool. Yeah, there is in Ontario, California. There's a small airport there.
Oh, yeah, there is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure which one was.
About this OJ, yes. Well,
yeah,
it's obvious that he did do it. Why would he be running from the police in a white Bronco van?
Right, when you're famous, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're like, I'm running from the cops because I have a warrant for my arrest. This guy's O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, but if he didn't do it, then he wouldn't run, right? 100%. It's obvious.
I'm with you. I think that's the logic that proves it right. Norman, thank you for the call. Great to hear from you. Glad to put a voice with the name. And a big shout out to everybody listening in Canada, listening online, richvaldez.com. That's Valdez with an S. Always a pleasure to speak with our international listeners. I really do appreciate that. Let me see. Where do we go here? Let's switch it up and go to Gary, who's calling from Ridgefield, Connecticut, WLAD. Go right ahead.
Hi, Mr. Valdez. Good to talk to you again. It's been a couple of months.
Likewise. Thank you.
The last time I talked to you, I mentioned that Dean Phillips' grandmother was Dear Abby, and you got all excited and told me and everybody else that you were thinking about a part of your show, a Dear Rich project.
Yes, and I think we're going to be launching that next week.
Well, last Friday you mentioned it for the first time, and I've been wondering about it all this time. I was kind of afraid that maybe somebody up above you would put the kibosh on it. So I was really happy.
Thankfully, and let me just give you an editorial note on that. That has never happened to me ever. The network we work with, Cumulus Radio, Westwood One, they are fantastic. They have never asked me, told me, or suggested that I say or think anything. And I just always want to be upfront about that. I probably couldn't do this any other way. But yeah, they're terrific.
Well, that's good to hear that you've got good people to work with. Something else I wanted to say was that regarding Gaza, Ukraine, and the border, I am absolutely with you 100%. When I hear you talk about those things, you're speaking for me as well. And everything you say, it just makes perfect sense. I don't understand how anybody with any kind of moral compass, or anyone that I know people have different perspectives, but it's just hard to understand people coming to different conclusions. regarding Ukraine and Vladimir Putin, I also wanted to say I share your disdain for him.
Good.
Years ago, I read something I think that describes him pretty well, lends some insight into his character. It said that when a little man casts a long shadow, it's a sign that the sun is going down.
That's a clever and a very interesting statement. Gary in Ridgefield, Connecticut, WLAD, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your kind words and for your follow-up on our Dear Richie segment. We're going to be doing that this week coming up. Like I said, I'll be in Florida for the next couple of days, but definitely on the radar, and we're looking to kick it off the right way. Big shout out to you in Connecticut. Folks are coming right back. Speed round coming up. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks, it is the speed round. Here we go. Let's see. What do we got here? We've got San Francisco, California, KVTA. David, go right ahead. Quickly.
Oh, thanks, Rich. Yeah, I'm looking at I remember that OJ case pretty well. There were people that claimed that he didn't actually murder her, but his actions led to her death. And I don't know if you know it, but OJ was raised in South San Francisco, and some people told me that he had been dealing cocaine, and he had been barred from almost every stadium in America because he was dealing, and he ended up getting his wife so addicted to cocaine that she ended up ending up with debts to dealers, and OJ didn't want to pay those dealers, and so the dealers killed his wife.
Wow.
And so that was
I had not heard that
of
one.
the wrongful death.
I hadn't heard that one. That's a new one for me. David in San Francisco. Big shout out to everybody listening on KVTA. Thank you. Let's continue. Where do we go now? We go to, where are we? I lost my place here. We have a minute and a half, 2 minutes. All right. Let's go to Mitchell, South Dakota, KRON, and check in with Robert. Robert, go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Regarding OJ, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And we pray for his soul, and we pray for everybody's soul. And he said he was not willing that anyone would perish and that all would have everlasting life.
Yeah.
And so that's how I feel about that.
Me too. I share that with you.
I agree with you. We shouldn't disparage the departed.
Yeah, we had enough time to do that when they were alive, right? That's how I look at it. Yeah, thank you for the call, Robert. I wish I could get to the next point, but the music is about to kick in, and they're going to kick me out of here, and I still have to shout out to it. Oh, look at that. There we go. Glenn in Akron, Ohio, WNIR. Scott in Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA. Paul, Ukraine. Excuse me, not in Ukraine. Paul's in Boise, Idaho. KBOI. Big shout out to you guys. Thanks for hanging in there. I'm sorry I didn't get to you. You guys are number one on the list tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, Monday. Tomorrow we've got a special program for you. I'm going to replay my Dr. Phil interview that we did recently where he talks about what's going on in America. And there's a lot more coming up. Folks, I appreciate you. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. And God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.